Welcome to PSY 316, Study Session 3, Sensory Memory. Introduction. This lecture presents a more comprehensive understanding of sensory memory as one of the three types of memory, according to Atkinson and Shiffrin, 1968. Focus will be on the nature of sensory memory, kinds of sensory memory, and pattern recognition in sensory memory. Objectives. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to 1. Explain how information gets into the sensory memory. 2. Discuss the nature of sensory memory. And 3. Explain kinds of sensory memory. Pre-test. 1. Explain the nature of sensory memory with examples. 2. Explain kinds of sensory memory. Content. Sensory memory. With regard to sensory memory, you are a camera. You take an instantaneous photo of whatever you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. For a fraction of a second, your brain absorbs the overall appearance of a room you step into, with its colors, shapes, and arrangements, and rumble of sounds around you on a busy street. This information is the raw data of life. You can either act upon it by taking it into your memory or ignore and forget it. The way this kind of memory works has been demonstrated by a series of experiments performed by Sperling, 1960. Nature of sensory memory. Sperling experiments demonstrated the short-lived but broad-based capacity of sensory memory. Before Sperling did this experiment, psychologists had performed many studies in which they showed people visual arrays of letters. No matter how many items were shown, from as few as 8 to as many as 20, most people could remember only 4 or 5. The natural assumption was that this was the maximum number of items people could take at a single glimpse. Many people insisted, however, that they had seen more items but had forgotten the others during the time it took them to report the first 4 or 5. If you were a subject in this study, you would be shown a grid like the one in the table 3 for less than a second. After the grid was removed, you would hear a tone telling you to report all letters you remembered from one of the rows. A high-pitched tone would mean the top row, a medium tone, the middle row, and a low tone, the bottom row. No matter which tone you heard, you would probably report 3 letters in any row, since you didn't know in advance which row you would be asked about. You must have remembered about 3 letters from each row, or 9 letters about twice the earlier estimate of what people can absorb into sensory memory. Table 3. Sperling's partial report technique of assessing sensory memory. LBON, which is the high tone, GRXK, medium tone, TCYF, low tone. The percentage of information you remember would vary depending on whether you were shown a 3x3 grid. You will probably remember virtually everything, or 3x4 grid, you would probably remember 75%. In this case, you will be reporting about 9 items. Sperling established the fleeting nature of sensory memory. He found that if he sounded the tone after a delay of 1 second, a subject would remember very little. Kinds of sensory memory. The kind of memory we have just been talking about, which involves vision, is known as iconic memory. An icon is an image. Apparently, iconic images fade more quickly than images in echoic memory, which involves hearing. An echo, of course, is the repetition of a sound. Echoic images last a bit longer, as you might have noticed if you have ever heard a radio continue to play after you turned it off. Although sensory information can enter through each of the 5 senses, most research has been done on iconic and echoic systems. Pattern recognition in sensory memory. When you receive information through the sensory memory, you have to make it meaningful to get it into your short-term memory. You do this through a complex process in which you match incoming sensory information with information you already have in long-term memory. If you have a name for a stimulus, you will mentally use that name. For example, suppose you see the number 7. You will immediately recognize this pattern, as you will if you see written as VII, small capital, a capital letter VII, or 7. You will recognize any of these patterns in a variety of sizes, colors, typefaces, or handwriting. If, however, you have never heard of the numerical concept 7, you will not have anything in LTM to match the 7, that is long-term memory. You see, thus will take 2. If, however, you have never heard of numerical concept 7, you will not have anything in long-term memory to match the 7 you see. Thus, you will find it more difficult to learn and remember this new information. The intricacy of human mind is emphasized by our ability to recognize patterns. Summary. The lecture focused on sensory memory, its nature, kinds and pattern, recognition in sensory memory, kinds of sensory memory, explained are iconic and echoic memory. Finally, emphasized the importance of patterns recognition in memory was emphasized. Post-test. 1. What is pattern recognition in memory? 2. Explain echoic sensory memory. End of study session 3. Thank you for listening.